Former UN ambassador and potential 2024 hopeful Nikki Haley is in the news today for comments she's been making about age, the president, and cognitive tests. Take a listen.
Let's face it, we've got a lot of people in leadership positions that are old.
Right.
And that's not being disrespectful,
Sure.
That's a fact. And when it comes to that, this shouldn't be partisan. We should seriously be looking at the ages of the people that are running our country and understand if that's what we want. But I think, you look at Biden and I think there's a concern. I think there's a concern when people say, who's really making the decisions here? That's his job to prove that he's making the decisions.
Well, I'm going to bring in our lead reporter and anchor, Gwen Baumgardner. Gwen, you've covered both Nikki Haley and even did a piece called "How Old is Too Old to Be President?" Tell me, what's your take on this?
Well, I do think it's so interesting because she says, these are some concerns. And I would agree. I mean, there are always concerns when you hear about older politicians that are running for election or re-election. And, it's not just Biden at 78, though he has said in the past that he is interested in running for re-election. But Chuck Grassley, he's 88. He says he wants to run for re-election. Nancy Pelosi, 81. And I mean, Trump wasn't young either. So I think people are really looking at, what do we want out of our politicians and is there a concern? Now, what that piece of the interview that we aired kind of left out was she is advocating for cognitive tests for older politicians. And I think that might be a sticking point with a lot of people because DC is not a young town. So I am a little curious about what her motivation is. Is it a way to highlight herself as a younger candidate ahead of 2024? Or is this, a real legitimate concern that she has? But I actually worked on a piece months ago titled, "How Old is Too Old to Be President?" And it was after President Biden said, yeah, I'm interested in running for a second term, which he'd be 82 at the time. And so I spoke to a neurologist who said, not all ages are the same. They're the same in number. You can have a 78-year-old, same birth year, but in terms of physically, cognitively, are they the same? No, not necessarily. And I think, could this in the future turn into, will we have cognitive tests? I'm a little skeptical. But Annie, I'm really curious about your take in DC. It's aging politicians. How would they respond to something like cognitive tests? Because it would impact quite a few people. I mean, just looking at the Senate makeup, half of it, 65 plus.
Yeah, and I did some research on this after I saw her comments. I thought, we've always known that the Senate and House are old. It's nothing new. But I was actually surprised. So in the Senate, there are 11 members of the silent generation, 27 in that generation from the House. But what actually surprised me is that the median age for the Senate is 64.8. I actually thought it was going to be a lot older because you always think of these older statesmen and adults. But let's just face it, nobody at any age wants to be like, I think you need to take a cognitive test. So I can only imagine how this would go over. Now, right now, there is just, Haley's mentioned it, and also the former White House physician, Ronnie Jackson, who's now a congressman, was kind of the first person to bring this up. And of course, you famously remember President Trump, when he was president, saying that he had effortlessly passed a cognitive test. But I would think that you have these people and they're not going to be wanting to have to take a test, every time they go for re-election. So in the House, every 2 years, I would think that this is not going to have widespread support.
Well, and I think it takes away maybe a little bit the voters, right? Like we watched them on the campaign trails, especially when it was Biden and Trump. So these two older men that would become, the oldest presidents. And people were able to see in those debates and kind of gauge themselves, are they having cognitive decline? Are they like the 75, 78-year-olds that I know? But I think you're exactly right in what you touched on. Nobody wants to sign up for a test like this. And I think even just passing it through, whether it was passing it through Capitol Hill, who's going to sign on to something like this? So again, I worked on a piece about how old is too old to be president. Nikki Haley herself, she's 49. So I guess in terms of DC standards, she's pretty young. But it does make you wonder, will she be running for president, being kind of the young one in DC? For those people who want to check out those pieces about Nikki Haley, her potential 2024 run, perhaps, and then also how old is too old to be president, and kind of looking into the research that I did there with the neurologists, with other, kind of Politico experts, they can head over to our website, straightarrownews.com. We'll also post the full interview from Nikki Haley so people can watch, or rewatch what she had to say about cognitive decline and about our aging politicians.
And we want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Do you want to see these tests? Let us know in the comments below. And Gwen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Annie.